thought we were all alone.
What the hell?
Dad?
What's up, gays? It's your girl Rose, and today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite scary movies of all time, and that is The Strangers. Now, The Strangers recently came out with a sequel, which I have not seen yet, but I am so excited to see it. It looks amazing, and I know it's been a huge box office hit, so I'm really, really excited about that. Now, the original movie scared the bejesus out of me. Oh my god. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it if you're one who is not, scared easily by movies, because that's kind of me. I'll watch a movie that everybody says is so scary, and I'll just kind of be like, I'll be scared, while I'm watching it, but I'll mostly be unfazed. Now, The Strangers is one of those movies that really, stuck with me and deeply disturbed me, which is why I was amazed to find out it is actually based on a true story. And this is one of those crazy cases where the true story is even scarier than the movie. The true story that The Strangers is based on is most commonly referred to as the Ketty Cabin murder. This was a quadruple homicide that took place in a cabin in Ketty, California. It is now called the infamous Cabin 28. 4 people lost their lives on April 11th in 1981 when someone brutally murdered Sue Sharp, her son John Sharp, who was only 15 at the time, and his friend Dana Wingate, who was 17. Shortly after the murders were discovered, the police realized that Sue's younger daughter, who was only 12 years old, Tina Sharp, was missing. 3 years later, her skull was found buried 60 miles away. The night before the murders took place, Sue's other daughter, Sheila Sharp, actually spent the night over at a friend's house. She was 14 years old at the time. The next morning, she went back home to discover her family dead. Not only had they been murdered, there was blood everywhere. It said that the blood was splattered onto the ceiling and all around the room, and Sue, John, and Dana were tied up as if they had been tortured before being killed. They had all been stabbed, and Sue had also been bludgeoned with a rifle, which meant that they had the option to shoot them, but they chose to stab them to death. And the police believed that this was very clearly a case of personal attack. This wasn't for money or a hit or anything nobody had hired them to do this. This was clearly, in the police's opinion, a personal attack due to the violent nature of the crimes. Now, the crazy thing is, Sheila actually ended up finding her other 2 brothers, who were only 5 and 10, asleep in the other room. They had slept through the entire thing, and they were completely physically unharmed. The case has actually now grown cold, but back in 1981, 2 of the original suspects were Martin Smart and John Bobinet. I hope I'm saying his name right. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't care about offending him. He's probably a murderer. Anyway, they were 2 of the original suspects. And although they've both died, the current sheriff, Greg Hagwood, actually believes that there are people connected to these murders that are still alive and free as of right now. He actually hired a special detective named Mike Gamberg to help him look into this case And this is still an ongoing investigation. I believe there's a $5,000 reward out right now for any information about anyone who could possibly know anything. Sheriff Greg Hagwood was actually in the same graduating high school class as John Sharp and Dana Wingate. So he actually has a personal connection to these murders. And he says that he actually used to work at the fairgrounds with John and Dana and was friends with them. So he definitely has personal motivation to make sure that this crime is solved. Now, Martin Smart and John Bobinet actually lived in Cabin 26 next door to the infamous Cabin 28 where the murders took place. One important detail is that Sue Sharp was really good friends with Martin Smart's wife, and she was actually encouraging her to leave him because she knew that he was abusive towards her. So she had been encouraging his wife to leave him. So that could possibly be motivation for him and his best friend, John Bobidet, to have brutally murdered her. Now that doesn't really explain, to me at least, why they would have chosen to also murder John and Dana and Tina as well. It's possible that because the 5-year-old and the 10-year-old were fine in the other room, keep in mind they slept through it, it's possible that the other kids actually heard what was going on and then they ended up having to be killed because they were witnesses. That's just speculation. Nobody really knows for sure because both of these guys were actually cleared. And the special detective Mike Gamberg, who was hired to work on this case, believes that there is something weird about the way that these two were cleared, which is also why he still believes that there's people who might have been involved or at least supportive in some way of these murders that are still around. Here's what he has to say about it. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but there are facts and circumstances, the number and nature of which I cannot ignore. So that implies that he's not just trying to draw this out or come up with a bunch of crazy theories. He's saying, look, it's weird how easily these two got cleared, and there could be something more going on. Now, Sheila Sharp, the one who actually discovered the murders, agrees with him, and this is what she has to say about it. That she was actually told that the suspects, Martin and John, were told to get out of town, which implies to her, and to me as well, definitely, that this was in fact a cover-up and a situation where, for some reason or other, the police did not want these two men to be caught. Definitely does seem as though the evidence and motives would be pointing towards Martin Smart and John Bobidet. However, there's another theory that I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about, but that came to mind for me. Sue Sharp had actually left her husband a year before. She had left him, he lived in Connecticut, and she moved to California basically to get away from him, go to these cabins with the kids, and stay there and be away from him. And to me, it occurs that possibly the husband didn't like this, and he ended up following her there. So he could also be a suspect in my mind. But there's so many possibilities. And one thing that pretty much everyone that I've seen talking about this mentions, and it's very important to realize, that the area, this Keddie, California, was so small that I want to say the population was around 100. So everyone was very close together in these cabins. And it's just very hard to believe that no one knew what was going on, and no one heard a scream, no one heard anything, and went to help. But then again, this 5-year-old and 10-year-old were sound asleep in the other room. They didn't wake up through it, so who knows? There's a lot of theories going on around this, and it's very interesting to think about and to explore the different theories. It's also really, really scary to watch The Strangers and think that something similar to this actually happened. Now, obviously, the story of The Strangers is very different. It's different characters, a different plot. It's not directly based off of it, but it was inspired from it, and that makes the movie all the more scary. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this backstory. I do recommend looking into it more because you will fall into a rabbit hole. It's a fascinating story, and hopefully the family that is remaining, especially Sheila, given what she witnessed, is able to find justice, and hopefully justice and peace eventually comes to this family, and this case ends up having closure. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good day.